Every human being is more unhappy than they appear to be. No matter how successfully we hide our unhappiness from the outside world, the moment we withdraw into our own shell and confront ourselves, we realize how unhappy we really are. But why is being unhappy considered something so trivial, something to be concealed? And if so many people around us are unhappy because of their jobs, families, or schools, why does sharing our own unhappiness feel so difficult? Emil Cioran is one of the philosophers who expressed his misery in perhaps the most striking way. In his books and writings, he almost cries out that he is a miserable person. Of course, alongside his sorrow, he also touches on the darker sides of life, and just looking at the titles of his books is enough to understand what these dark sides are. On the Heights of Despair, The Book of Delusions, The Trouble with Being Born. Anyone who names their books in this manner can easily be seen as a deeply pessimistic person. However, Cioran's way of handling pessimistic topics is quite different from other writers. He offers extremely sharp observations about the absurdity of life, existential agony, and suicide. First, we must speak about Cioran's unhappiness, because he is someone who wrote the Book of Misery, both literally and metaphorically. And this unhappiness had followed him since childhood. His mother, who sensed this misery, once told Cioran, "If I had known you would be so unhappy, I would have had an abortion." Cioran's response was just as striking. "I am a simple accident. There's no need to take me so seriously." Unable to sleep at night, wandering the streets until late hours, claiming that one of his greatest hobbies was visiting cemeteries, Cioran noticed that his mind overflowed with dark thoughts about life and felt compelled to write them down. Naturally, those who read his works cannot resist asking, "Why do you write so pessimistically?" Cioran answers this question with a reply that is as dark as it is sincere. "Everything becomes more bearable once it's put into words." We could even say that the act of writing saved Cioran's life. He believed that every book ever written was a postponed suicide. Had he not started writing, he would have been ruined. He even claimed he might have become a hired killer. When we read his work, we see that his style is unlike that of other philosophers. It is difficult to call Cioran a philosopher in the traditional sense. Rather than constructing arguments and defending concepts, what he usually does in his books is simply pour out his inner world. "I discovered nothing. I merely continued being the secretary of my own feelings," he says. Like every unhappy person, he questioned the reasons behind his misery. For him, the greatest cause of this unhappiness was his nihilistic view of life. Like other pessimistic thinkers, he saw life through the lens of nihilism. For him, life has neither meaning nor purpose. "If the world had a meaning, it would have been revealed by now," he says. What struck Cioran even more was not the meaninglessness of life, but how people responded to this meaninglessness. According to him, almost everyone knows deep inside that life is absurd. Yet, what surprised him was the ease with which people place themselves into frameworks of meaning, especially faithful and serene people. Those were the ones who astonished Cioran the most, because he himself had never managed to be either faithful or serene. From childhood onward, he suffered from existential anguish and repeatedly stated that he struggled with it. Even while walking outside in a gathering with friends or doing something enjoyable, an unexpected sense of emptiness and meaninglessness would suddenly strike him. Throughout his life, he battled these sudden waves of existential pain. His famous aphorism beautifully captures this experience. Wherever I go, I carry the same feeling of not belonging, the same sense of futility. I pretend to be interested in something that means nothing to me, either mechanically or out of kindness. But I never get anywhere. Something else attracts me, a place I do not know. We can also describe Cioran as an antinatalist. He opposed the idea of bringing a child into such a world, saying, "If only the children I didn't bring into this world knew the happiness they owe me." His life is quite consistent with this idea. He lived 84 years without ever marrying or having children. One reason he refused to bring children into the world was his belief that the world is purposeless and bleak. Another was his idea that the creature called human is a kind of error. Comparing humans to other animals, he concluded that humans are the most helpless of all creatures because they are cursed with something deeply troubling: boredom. He gives the example of a gorilla in a zoo. Though the gorilla lives a monotonous, meaningless, and dull life, it does not rebel or suffer an existential crisis. But if a human were placed under the same conditions, the boredom and repetitiveness would drive them insane. For Cioran, humans are always chasing novelty, events, or purpose. Yet this constant search is a sign of human weakness. The more they chase a purpose, the more they stray from themselves. Their perspective narrows, and they fail to see certain truths. He believed that the cruelty in the world stems from people who devote themselves completely to a purpose and lose awareness. Thus, he arrives at this conclusion: a person must live without purpose. Only those who can live without any purpose can exist without alienating themselves or others, fully aware of reality. Yet, despite trying, Cioran says he was never able to reach this state. "I am too weak for such a happiness," he admits. It is impossible for someone with thoughts this dark not to have reflected on the topic of suicide. Strangely, Cioran considered suicide to be absurd. For him, the desire to commit suicide relates more to the past than to the future. People want to kill themselves not because they fear future suffering, but because they regret the suffering they have already endured. But since those pains have already occurred and cannot be undone, one is always too late for suicide. Cioran also believed that suicide is born not from pessimism but from optimism. Only optimists commit suicide, optimists who can no longer remain optimistic. And since others have no reason to live, why should they have a reason to die? In this sense, he himself is quite consistent, since he is someone far removed from optimism. Perhaps this pessimism helped him live until the age of 84. He did not die by suicide, but by Alzheimer's disease, which we can consider a natural cause. Before ending this video, I want to mention something unusual I noticed about Cioran. If you watch his interviews, you'll see that despite his ideas, he appears to be a surprisingly lively person. He talks about the cruelty of life and then laughs at a joke 2 minutes later. While discussing topics that darken the soul, he gives the impression of someone excited and full of vitality. Someone who doesn't understand what he is saying might even think he is a cheerful person. I leave it to you to interpret how he could possess such an enthusiastic manner despite his pessimistic mind. I do not recommend reading Cioran to those who wish to overcome their unhappiness. Cioran is for people who want to accept their misery and even find comfort in it. Looking back at his philosophy, we see that he held two attitudes toward unhappiness. One is not taking life too seriously. You can even see this in his interviews. He is pessimistic, yet he doesn't let the pessimism devour him. Seeing the world as meaningless and absurd offers, in its own way, a kind of relief. But what truly allows Cioran to live with his sorrow is that he does not see unhappiness as an enemy. He recognizes that his misery, too, has given him something. Realizing that he could only write when he felt unhappy or depressed shows that sorrow has a creative and profound side. His words on the dual nature of misery help us understand him better. Love your unhappiness, detest your happiness. Everything becomes entangled. Every gain is a loss. Every loss a gain.